Express Media acknowledges that this launch is being live-streamed from the stolen lands of the Wurundjeri and Boon Wurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. We also pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the lands on which our readers have written and shared their work from. We acknowledge that First Nations people are the traditional custodians of this land, whose cultures are among the oldest living cultures in human history. We pay respect to the elders of these communities, past and present, and extend that to emerging community leaders. We recognise that sovereignty was never ceded and that colonisation is an ongoing process. It was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land.
Cool brine spills across Pickle. The sea in Christy Ann Jones's The Mercy of Sea Foam. Narcissus's pool in Hanking Lee's Simplicity and Preservation. The storm in Amy Cass's How Else Do You Traverse a Storm? At first, I noticed 2 or 3 of these water pieces, but on each reading, I find more. Feelings spill in Donnalyn Xu's Dream Translation, and bathtubs fill with bright gold seeds in Derek Chan's Where There's Water. In Lejane Harani's Encircle, there is a desire to be unlidded, to dribble. Egg yolks are too dry, but information is beginning to leak. These connections emerge in every issue of Voiceworks, yet their discovery still surprises me every time, brings me a warm, unexpected glow at these connections that our community is intangibly creating with one another. In launch speeches, the editor of Voiceworks will always thank our writers and our editorial committee, but these thank yous have had a different weight for the past 6 issues that were produced in and out of lockdowns in Australia, as well as under the greater threats that COVID has presented internationally. I always struggle with what to say about this, even in casual conversation, the awkwardness of simply asking, "How are you?" There's so much that has been said and so little of it that feels like it conveys the collective weight of these past 18 months. It is sometimes easy to minimise the impact this has all had on our lives to logistics, but the pandemic has also added a constant sense of dread, loneliness, and increased precarity, along with an urgency to look out for our loved ones who are also experiencing that dread, loneliness, and precarity. Voiceworks is made up of many interlocking parts. Between our writers, artists, designer, editor, and administrators, around 50 people touch some part of every single issue, usually in tandem. That under these circumstances, they have been able to keep making this work together. Doing so with patience and kindness and flexibility when needed is something I can't quite fathom. I also want to send my love to all of those who are unable to contribute to this issue for whatever reason. I hope you are taking care and know you will always be a welcome part of our community, even when you need to prioritise your own well-being. I'm so appreciative to have had the opportunity to work with and know so many thoughtful, kind and patient people in this time. I am a firm believer that the process of making something is as important as the product, or rather that the energy of the process is tangible in the product. And I hope all of the love and kindness and carefulness that has gone into this issue and every issue of Voiceworks can somehow seep into the lives of all of our readers and editors and writers and family members who supportively buy the magazine even though they don't know anything about it. Thank you so much.
Misadventures of the Anaerobic Heart is a beautiful short story by the amazing writer Maya Crombie. In this story, we follow the emotional and subconscious journey of the narrator. We first meet them while they're riding around in the back of the bus on a rainy night, and they're watching the people around them, and they're going through a lot of emotional turmoil, and it seems like they're searching for someone, but we don't really know who or why or what's really happening. Then the narrator seeks clarity by shaking the magic 8-ball in their chest, and with each shake, we descend into a series of different memories, dreams, and visions that reveal more and more about the internal chaos they're experiencing and who it is they might be looking for. At the heart of this piece is a very relatable and very evocative sense of loneliness and longing. Maya also explores many other touching themes like young love, romantic angst, family, and identity, and these are all introduced and addressed with outstanding subtlety, and they weave in really perfectly with her free and fragmentary internal monologue. I really, really love Maya's poetic prose and her beautiful, unique, and experimental style. Not everyone can pull this sort of style off, but she did it, and she did it really, really effectively. And I just think this piece is so beautiful, so sharp, and so emotionally evocative. And it was such a pleasure to work with somebody who was so young and so talented. She is only 15, so this is incredible. And Maya also had exams during the editing process, which must have been very, very stressful. But she still worked so hard and she was still really great to work with, and I hope this was a good experience for her as well. And I am sure that all of us will be reading and hearing much more brilliant writing from Maya in the future. And in the meantime, I hope you all enjoy her wonderful, wonderful story.
Hello, my name is Maya, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my piece. I hope you enjoy it. Him. Later, I walk down the dirt path to his house, an old farmhouse out in a barren paddock. There are cars in the driveway. I check the front door. It creaks open. Beer voices and glass clinks come from the kitchen. I have always been a snail. I like the rain. I like to crawl through puddles. Sometimes it's easier just to recoil and detach. Pull away and enter passivity. Easier to be still than crushed under the weight of my own protection. Smoke is visible and stale in the air. It adds to the dank, sooty smell. I remember when he told me about his father who had died. He slipped in the bathroom and cracked his head open. Avery was left with nothing but seeds to spread. His kisses sent them down my throat, and they sprouted inside me, my own forgotten pains coming out through my mouth like a weed. He is too much like me. He is my disease vector. We are both snails. We recoiled back into our shells. I turn and leave. Reply hazy. Try again. Release. The rain had been persistent all day. It hadn't shown any signs of slowing down, just like when Rosie cried in her bed. She had worn the white shirt and the shorts and the socks to school. They were her brothers, my stepbrothers. And I heard them through the paper walls of our origami house. Why? Why can't I? Because it isn't proper. But why? Because you're a girl. And so on. Wailing banshee, sick, crazy witch. Later that night, I lay down next to Rosie. It was soft breath, shaky tears, rustling, and so on. She said to me, Edgar, sometimes I wish that we could just switch places. We'd be better off that way. I said, that would just make me even more confused. Remembering the warming feeling of finding his pulse and pretending it's mine. The spitting rain fell down on my umbrella under umbrella of night. I walked through the fields behind his house, even though I knew that there were huntsmen there. I have always been a worm, snail, ant. I crawl around at the base of the eucalyptus, looking up at the skinned, naked tree. They've carved their initials into the flesh, immortalizing their teenage affections. I'll never be part of them, dwarfed by their ambitions. Tall, dead grass tickles at my legs. When you're down so low, you don't need oxygen. I find the main road, the bus stop, and direction. I wonder what my brother will say when I get home. A, you weren't riding the bus again. B, you weren't in town. C, you weren't with that French boy. And D, you weren't infinitely wandering. Better not tell you now. Friends. I check my bed, the walls, and the roof for spiders. My mind is buzzing with thoughts. The headache makes me feel like my brain is closing in on itself. Now I have left the night, the world that is shiny and damp. Sleep will help the morning pity the musings of my nighttime ramble. It's partly my own fault. It's mostly my own fault. It's all my own fault. You can sit next to them too. I refuse to believe that I'm a quiet one. I am though, and I'm not even an interesting, brooding one. Just boring, shallow, a cardboard lone wolf laughing from the sidelines, watching as the wind carries schoolyard rubbish, yesterday's leaves, and an unwashed smell along, listening as a low whistle of warning escapes the teacher's mouth. Quiet. The most boring life I've ever lived is my own. I have no air. The conversations with my fictional voices are hollow and flat. I tell them about my day and they ask the questions, dreaming of the day someone will ask them truly, fearing that I only love him because he was the first person to truly notice me. It is decidedly so. Reset. A part of me is feeling excited, so I ride around in the front of the bus. There is a woman looking out the window and talking on the phone. 2 children are twittering about summer holiday plans at the back of the bus. It is daytime and the clouds float by like dairy cow spots. Maybe I could reach out and stuff the artificial sweetness down my throat. Or maybe I could hold on and fly away like a helium balloon, filled at least with some kind of air. The echoes of those past conversations, falling in and out of French. I reach down to my wrist and find my pulse, pretending it's his. Ask again later. I have always been a moth. I can't accept how I used to be. I flushed myself down the drain with the ashes. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello from beautiful yet locked down Darragland. I'm Jocelyn, one of the editors on the poetry team, and I'm really happy to today introduce Donnalyn Xu's poem, Dream Translation, which was edited by Isabella Gallifalori. I have been a long-time admirer of Donna's poetry, and when she recites her poem, I think you will see why. Dream Translation captivates, with brightness like citrus fruit in winter. The spaced caesuras of this poem are like ribs peeling apart to let in a clean, fragrant breath of air. According to Donna, this poem was written as a way to bridge the disconnect between her real and poetic worlds. It puts thoughts that can be violent into something digestible. This idea is expressed through the title, which implies that subconscious feelings are translated into being through language. Her editor, Isabella, comments on the doubleness and even tripleness in this poem, especially in the metatext of the process of creating poetry. There is a poet, and there is a persona, and there is also a speaker of my poems. Donna's personae are lyrical in their thoughts, capturing the romantic sparks that can be found in the smallest of details. But Dream Translation is a poem that notices everything, particularly if it is the colour of sunlight. Donna's poetry adores beauty, even if it belies something more painful. Please welcome Donnalyn Xu with Dream Translation.
Hello, my name is Donnalyn. I'm 22 years old. I live on stolen Cabral land, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. This is my reading of Dream Translation for Voiceworks. Appropriately for this poem, I'm also in the bathroom, so if you hear any drippy noises, please just think of it as ambience. This is Dream Translation. The speaker of my poems manufactures joy with radiance. Organic feelings bubbling over, the way verb pumice into metaphor is a relational spill dissolved into sweetness. The speaker always holds the mandarin in the hollow cusp of her palm before she eats. This too is a sweetness that lives on the skin, an effervescent bodily practice she is helplessly devoted to. She pledges allegiance to all tender fruits, anything that wilts and propagates syrup, blooming endlessly, like most desires. The first time she eats an orange in the shower, she lets the juice run down her chin and licks the angular slope of her wrist, enamored with the sticky hairs on her forearm, tasting salt brine and zest and forgiveness. Rain petals on Valencia flesh, honeyed nectar fragrance simmering everywhere, a blood rush pink, pried open without rot. The heavy scent of orange peel in the steaming air is the only memory that stays in the poem. She unsalts every wound she ever inflicted on her body. Like a child who recoils from violence, she wants to know what hands are capable of. She ornaments nakedness, dresses herself clean again, says, "Trust me, it's more romantic to segment affection and bite into it." Isn't every ode to beauty an elegy first? And what else can this body digest if not emptiness? I won't pretend I want to be unsayable. I want to ripen a language made easy to swallow, peel the bitter rind with my fingers, in the shower, in the dream, in the city of adornment, wash, open and exhume. A fizzled heart beneath a weeping faucet, not the sweetness that I crave, but the hunger. Thank you.
Do you think Pickles is doing a good job of hosting this launch? Would you like Pickles to host your dinner party, birthday party, or solo movie night? Well, good news! For the low, low price of $60, you can subscribe to Voiceworks. Arranging your issues of Voiceworks in a semicircle will summon Pickles to your living room for your event. Voiceworks issues must include issue 123, themed Pickles.
The next reading is the nonfiction piece Dispatches from the Altar of Beauty by Bella Suckling. Bella Suckling is a creative writing and politics student living in Naarm. This piece explores beauty and the rituals which we knowingly and unknowingly perpetuate in our continual yearning to be desirable. It navigates the various archetypes and myths that surround beauty in supple, lucid, and lyrical prose. Articulating both cerebral and intimate truths, Suckling examines the altar of beauty with the familiarity of a devotee, as well as the astute detachment of a skeptic. Editing this piece made me reflect on the space that beauty takes up in my life, and more importantly, oh, there they are! Please welcome Bella Suckling, reading Dispatches from the Altar of Beauty.
Hi, I'm Bella, and I'm going to read from my essay Dispatches from the Altar of Beauty, which is in the latest issue of Voiceworks, Pickle. And just a quick content warning, this extract includes discussions of bodies and food and exercise that might be triggering to people who have experienced disordered eating. So just a heads up on that. Okay, let's go. 1. Ritual. Daily I watch my friends enact rituals of control and augmentation. They negotiate personae, attempting to embody the imagined desires of imagined people. I take part in similar rituals. I oscillate between veganism and vegetarianism. I obediently strip my face of its oil and drench it in a different oil from a little bottle like a rebirth. I online window shop for Miu Miu dresses that would make me look like a doll. I struggle to disentangle these habits and disciplinary choices. Vanity, art, and environmentalism become difficult to tell apart. To witness these acts of control and reorganization is to reach for the same questions again and again. Can you worship beauty from a place of love, from some kind of divine and transcendent space, or must it erupt from a place of punishment, disgust, self-flagellation? Is beauty a kind of surrender, or is surrender the opposite of a commitment to beauty? I think of Zadie Smith's On Beauty. One character in the novel, Kiki, is the mother of a girl about my age. This is why Kiki had dreaded having girls, Smith writes. She knew she wouldn't be able to protect them from self-disgust. I think, can I protect my friends from self-disgust? Can I protect myself? These are all worthy questions, but they are questions that remain abstract, given that they are rendered hopeless out in the field. On the ground, there is no time for morality or philosophizing. There is only time for altering the body. This need for alteration goes by different names, assuming false motives of health and longevity or some approximation of empowerment. I'm not sure if the impulse comes from punishment or disgust. Perhaps it's devotion or self-respect. The need for change is bottomless. No amount of actual change will quench it. And the implication is that what already exists is not adequate. In fact, it is not only inadequate, it is repulsive. 2. Counting. To strive for thinness is to live in a numerical world. To strive for thinness is to apply order over chaos, limitation over excess. It involves the triumph of Apollo over Dionysus, the triumph of restraint. Under these restrictions, an experience that should incite pleasure, for instance, eating a bocconcini and tomato sandwich, green and white and red, oily, rich, wonderful, becomes fraught, reduced to a set of numbers. When you are counting, there's no room for the senses. They distract you from the task at hand. In his essay Against Exercise, Mark Grief tells us the counting expresses a will on the part of each and every individual to discover and regulate the machine-like processes in his own body. The counting habit he concludes, gives a precise economic character to health. It determines the anticipated numbers for the days and hours of one's life. I run about 5 times a week around a dog park near my house. I wear big black headphones that drown out the fleshy and dog-like sound of my own breathing. The same sounds come from the poodles and greyhounds that surround me. I do not want to be confronted with my animal nature, my unattractiveness. Exercising in public is an experience of denial. You retreat into your own world to ignore your humiliation. You are in pain in public. Your face is red and uneven in public. You wear lycra, your Nike sports bra becomes wet with sweat. This clothing is tight and sticks to your body. It has the safety signals of sexual allure but does not acknowledge the existence of sex in any real way. Athleisure is sexless. All these things indicate a need for privacy that is impossible while running in a public park. Running in public also facilitates separateness. You are removed from the world around you, but you know you can be seen. Every 5 or so minutes on a run, I hear the voice of an artificial woman telling me how long I've run my pace and how many calories I've burnt. The Nike Running Club app delivers that atomization for free. Sometimes it's a buzzkill. My pace is down, I'm exhausted, I'm humiliating myself in a public park. But there's relief in that generic female voice. The voice gives me numbers I can control. They correspond to the length of my life and to my sexual viability. Disciplining my body to achieve the barest minimum of flesh is not only a way of starving off the thought of death and assimilating with my peers, it's also the way I interface with the erotic, the only way I know how. This is not a confession of an eating disorder, or at least I don't intend it to be. Rather, I am taking note of an intermittent background noise, one I observe in most people that I know. The counting creates and accelerates a disordered approach to sexuality, to control, and to self-worth. But it is a mental undercurrent endured by almost every person in my life. The prevalence of this undercurrent leads me to think we live in a world that necessitates disorder. Disordered eating and compulsive exercise are encouraged as the most accessible, honourable paths to desirability. To quote again from Grief, exercise means something other than health to a young person who conceives sexual desirability as the truth about herself most worth defending. The body itself becomes the location of the sexiness, rather than clothes or wit or charisma. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Claire Cow and I'm a fiction editor for Voiceworks. For this round, I was lucky enough to edit Joel Keith's piece, Still Life. This was a piece that immediately jumped out to me from the start because of its stunning introductory scenes. We opened during a still life class, the narrator enraptured by the transformative act of painting. Joel's style is visceral and sensuous. It really captures the contradictory sensations of still life painting. Even though the painter is trying to depict something static, the act of mark making, of shaping colour and light from nothing, is inherently something that's full of motion and life. The craft of painting makes the physical object greater than the sum of its parts. These ideas are reflected by the trajectory of Joel's story and the careful thought put into their prose. Much like how a painting of an apple may have visible brush marks, Joel draws attention to the construction of his sentences. Using wordplay, repetition, long tumbling sentences, and creative punctuation, the narrator draws attention to the form of the story, as a conduit for their growing romanticization of Jamie, the object of their desire. Beyond the beauty of this piece, editing Joel was also such a fun and engaging experience. Joel was very forthcoming about their influences and formative writers. We talked about everyone from Garth Greenwell to Rilke. But ultimately, Still Life wholly stems from Joel's clear and original vision. I'll end this intro with a line from one of their early emails that I thought really sums the piece up. This piece is about coming to a realization by not moving forwards but inwards, from broad strokes to details. I hope you enjoy this piece as much as I did. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joel Keith. I'm coming to you somewhat unorthodoxly from my backyard outside at night to escape from share house noise. So hopefully this can add to the kind of general underlying spookiness of the story. So yeah, this one's called Still Life. There's this awareness you sometimes come to in a still life class. Let me explain. It begins workmanlike, sketching the shapes, blocking the tones and colours. After a while, you switch to a smaller brush, add highlights, blemishes, the finer points. Still, it does not look quite real. So you pay closer attention to the path of the light, the violence of the shadow, the intricate dance of reflection and refraction, moving all around you so fast as to appear still. And now your subject is not the fruit, but the dance of that light's motion, rebounding off the taut skin of a pear, swooping through the shadowed hollow of the bowl below and back up again. Suddenly, even something as ordinary as an apple seems too much to articulate, too detailed and alive. But if you hadn't tried, you would have only ever seen a bowl of fruit. That overused word, moved, clarifies itself in moments like these. You understand one is moved by art because all art is movement. All art is movement. The conservation of motion, from the hand to the brush to the hair on the back of the neck, and the laugh in the belly, and the tear welling up and tumbling down the cheek. It is movement, beginning in the world and redirected through the body. Strange that only by focusing so intently on the still can we become aware of this constant motion. Stranger still how quickly we forget it once we leave the room. I get home, and the fruit I see browning in a bowl doesn't seem miraculous at all. I first saw Jamie in a still life class. He immediately struck me as odd. Like a statue out of antiquity whose creator had taken liberties with the human form. Neck long, bones curved, child's face on a man's body. Laboured over so as to go unnoticed at first, but becoming more impossible the more you looked. Some Homeric spirit, in a body that strained and bent but could not quite accommodate it. People did not come like this, I knew, or felt I knew. They, we, are animals. We represent nothing, living to be alive, to undergo the processes of aliveness, as any animal does. Jamie was different. He ate when it was time to eat, never because he was hungry. He slept when it was time to sleep. He never kissed, only kissed back. Making no choice that could not have been made by a machine, each as if to demonstrate that, yes, he was unquestionably living. In observing him, I began to notice how I had, over time, allowed every aspect of my life to drift and fall askew, and felt compelled to work them back into order, into the machinery of his. His kettle, curtains, and lamp were colour-coordinated because those were considerations decent people made. Soon mine were too. He planned his meals and shopped precisely once per week. Now so did I. I don't know if you could call it love. It was representational of love, at least. It showed enough of love's symptoms for me to fool myself if I wanted. Which I did. I had found the other into which I could be absorbed, as into a warm pool, completely. Eventually I got out of the water. It was summer, and hot. A heat that wrings you out like a towel. There would be weeks where I could think of nothing to do but lie naked on my bed and feel the barrier between sheet and skin dissolve in sweat. As I lay there, the smells in my apartment began to intensify over days. I felt the acrid tang of evaporated sweat deeper in the back of my nose and throat. The unwashed containers of takeaway scattered around the bed and kitchen began smelling stronger of the foods they had contained, then wilder and less food-like. Their smells were new and complex. I imagined the blotchy, voluminous mold, the different colours it might be taking based on the smells which arose. I imagined the veins breaking down, the bluish blood collecting in limp, pink skin under the bed. The body stiffening into a pose not unlike mine, like it was my shadow, or I was its image projected upwards through the mattress. I could feel, the microbes, making their intrepid way outwards from Jamie's stomach to his intestines and beyond. The gases forcing open his lips, nose, and anus, blistering his skin and sloughing it downwards until it draped loosely over his green-black body and collected on the carpet like a tablecloth covering yesterday's meat. I've lain on this bed and danced for days. Thank you.